Welcome back, Crypt Kitties, as we're taking another look at Tales from the Crypt. Today I've got an episode that's sure to send a jolt up your spine as we dive into The Man Who Was Death, the very first episode of Tales from the Crypt. Well, technically you could say it was the second, seeing as how And All Through the House was filmed first, but both episodes did debut on the same day, with this one being the first to hit airwaves, so it's up to you. The Man Who Was Death was written by Robert Renault, known for movies like Action Jackson and The Demolition Man, along with Walter Hill, who also directed the episode and is known for producing the Alien franchise and directing movies like 48 Hours and Red Heat. The Man Who Was Death follows Niles Talbot, played by character actor William Sadler, an executioner who ends up losing his job and decides to start playing Vigilante, but not so much Batman Vigilante, more so Punisher Vigilante, just with electricity. One thing you'll notice about the episode is how much of it is just voiceovers or monologues. The episode opens with Niles talking about the latest man on death row, Charlie Ledbetter. Old Charlie here decided to kill his boss after 7 years of work and not a single raise. Now, I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, but I kinda feel ya.
Last one went right through a glass wall into a secretary that's passing by. Got it right behind the ear.
Alright, so maybe the boss was a dick, but I doubt the poor secretary had anything to do with it. Niles takes great pleasure in knowing this man is gonna die, and I don't care what anyone has done, but you have to be a twisted individual to get off on pulling the switch.
Nice thing about electricity is it's clean. Of course, I have seen a few heads smoke after it's all over. Smoking head ain't very pretty.
I don't know about it not being pretty, but the smell has to be ungodly. Niles also likes to talk to the audience a lot, but does anyone else in the room notice he's just staring off into space and talking to no one? Maybe it's time to get a new executioner.
They say electric current's so fast the brain gets cooked just as soon as the switch is throwed. Prisoner never feels a thing. Boy, I'd hate to think that was true.
They need to have a better screening process when choosing executioners, because no one should be this happy. He then monologues again about his love for electricity. Niles started as an electrician, then moved to the prison where he worked on their generators, until he was then promoted to executioner. Ah, the electrician to executioner pipeline. Proof that if you stay dedicated, you too can turn your passion for circuits into a state-sponsored body count. Nothing satisfies that post-execution hunger quite like a cheese sandwich and a black coffee.
The legislature is prepared to vote whether or not to rescind the death penalty in this state, only a few hours after the execution of Charles Ledbetter.
Get rid of the death penalty? Well, that's really gonna mess with the executioners union. And just like that, Niles lost his job. I guess he's gonna have to update his resume. Specialist in Human Resources, formerly state certified. The worst part is he can't even get his old job back. The guy he trained is still there, and they don't want Niles being around the prisoners, since they all knew what he was doing. But why would you let the prisoners know who the executioner is anyways? Isn't that supposed to be anonymous? You'd think they'd at least slap a mask on him or give him a fake mustache or something.
Most ballroom conversations is either about baseball, football, boxing, or pussy. But with me, it's different.
Yeah, Niles goes to reminisce about executions like they're fishing stories. The barkeep starts getting into his head about what a shame that a talent like his should go to waste. Niles thinks that if every cell had a TV that aired the executions, that would get the prisoners to act right. But if they're already prisoners, that means they already committed a crime. So I don't know how that's supposed to deter them from anything.
And the commentator is saying how if they televised executions, the whole country would just stop the death penalty. They'd all be too sick from it. They wouldn't let it happen again.
Yeah, maybe back then. People are so desensitized now that folks would be live tweeting, rating the technique, and complaining about the camera angles.
They put executions on TV, be the fucking highest rated show of all time.
It's world's deadliest executions.
Niles starts talking to the camera again, and does no one notice this crazy person talking to himself? Finally, someone noticed! In the meantime, murderer James Flood is on trial, and because of a simple clerical error, he's set free. You know, this is exactly how Freddy Krueger got off.
You killed my brother!
Give him back, will you? Your brother was a
Alright, well don't worry, in a few years he'll be having his clothing stolen by the Terminator. I guess now that Niles has a lot of free time on his hand, he's just gonna watch murder trials. Even though he lost his job, he's not about to let some skeezy biker get away with murder. I wonder what he's gonna do with those. He may have gotten off on a technicality, but he couldn't escape the shock treatment. Niles and the barkeep gloat over the death of Flood, but the barkeep has no idea Niles is the murderer.
It's only the minorities that get the chance. Did you ever notice that?
And they're all pretty dark when I get done with them, Vic.
Well, at least Niles doesn't discriminate. Next up at court are Cynthia and Theodore, who are found innocent of murdering Theodore's ex-wife. However, Niles sees things much differently. He thinks Theodore traded in his wife for a younger model and killed her so he could avoid a messy divorce. We then cut to a shower scene, which is very integral to the plot. I mean, just look at all that plot. Now there won't be any hanky-panky when Niles is around.
Wait a minute. Yeah. It's all Ted's idea.
Nothing like a little hot water to boil the truth out of someone. What's this? A go-go dancer is acquitted of boyfriend's murder? I wonder what Niles has to say about this. Niles goes to the club where this woman dances and look at all that plot. One moment Niles goes on about how he doesn't hate women, and then the next he's talking about how they'll ruin your life. I don't know, man. I think you gotta pick a side.
You got the queen bitch herself. Yes, sir. I got just what the doctor ordered for you.
Most people tip with singles. Niles tips with amperage. Is he trying to electrocute her or start her engine? You know, I'd love to know how he set all this up without anyone noticing.
Goddamn hell is going on here?
First time in his life he had performance issues, and wouldn't you know it, in front of a topless audience. Well, now this is interesting. Niles is the one being arrested. But it's okay, Niles. It's not like they're gonna bring back the death penalty.
Since you're such a staunch supporter of capital punishment, you'll be glad to know the state legislature has just reinstated the death penalty.
One minute he's handing out volts, the next he's riding the lightning. Life really does come at you shockingly fast. It's funny because in the beginning of the episode, Niles was making fun of the men on death row that were crying for help, and now he's in that exact same spot. Although to be fair, he was taking out scumbags who got away with murder. He wasn't exactly murdering people that were innocent. The man who is death can be found in the pages of Crypt of Terror number 17, which only a few issues later would be rebranded as Tales from the Crypt. The story was written by comic book legend Gardner Fox, and if you don't know who that is, he is the co-creator of characters like The Flash, Hawkman, and Zatanna. And here he is writing a little horror story for what would become Tales from the Crypt. The artwork for this story was done by Bill Fraccio, who isn't nearly as legendary, and I believe this is his only contribution to Tales from the Crypt or any of the EC horror comics. The cover art for Crypt of Terror number 17 was illustrated by frequent EC comic collaborator Johnny Craig and features a woman as she is being stalked by a werewolf. It's pretty classic stuff, but I love the touch with the newspaper that reads "Werewolf Strikes Again." Edgar Bowman, the state's executioner, has a thing for putting criminals away for good. He seems to take pleasure in flipping the switch and ending the lives of murderers. Night after night, Edgar walked home proud of what he considered to be an honest day's work. It didn't matter if it were man or woman, if they were found guilty of the crime, then they were set to fry. Even the police marveled at just how much pride he took in his work. Edgar's willingness to flip the switch made him somewhat famous to the nearby states. They would offer him the chance to execute their criminals as their guest of honor, be it by electricity, gas, or hanging. It didn't matter to Edgar as long as he was the one throwing the lever. And then one day, out of the blue, Edgar was called into the office because, as it turned out, people were starting to behave. Seems like the executions were working so well that there was no need for the death penalty anymore. Edgar wasn't worried because he knew people couldn't help themselves to murder. But as time went on, more and more people were found innocent by the juries. With lots of free time on his hands, Edgar watched many trials. George Flood, not guilty. Betty Bates, not guilty. All Edgar could hear anymore was not guilty. It was starting to drive him mad because he knew these people needed to be punished. And if the law wasn't going to do it, then he would. That night, Casper Jones arrived home from work, but unfortunately for him, Edgar had wired the fence. Casper would only be the first of Edgar's vigilante justice as he had much more work to do. A few nights later, Arthur Boway went for a shower, all the while talking to himself about what a free man he was. Safe. Safe at last after all those months of worry. I don't know who killed Jim, but I didn't, and thank goodness the jury believed me. I don't know why an innocent man would need to say these things to himself when he's alone in his house. It's almost like he's trying to convince himself that he didn't do it. Anyways, Edgar electrocutes him in the shower. Next up is George Flood. The jury may have found him innocent, but Edgar sure as hell won't. During a rainstorm, Edgar waits perched atop an electrical pole. Edgar snips one of the wires and wraps it around George's neck, frying him in an instant. With murders piling up, the police are starting to suspect that these deaths aren't accidental. They figure since Betty Bates had been recently set free, that she might be next. So the next day they start placing plainclothes detectives to keep watch of her. Edgar, having worked with the men, now knows he'll need to play things a little smarter, so he builds a Looney Tunes style trough filled with electrified water that he's gonna throw her in. When Edgar attempts to grab Betty, a bolt of lightning lights up the sky, giving way to his hiding spot and allowing one of the detectives to capture him. Imagine being exposed by the very thing that you used to kill. Months later, Edgar is dragged down to the very chair he once operated with such pride. The same room, the same lever, only this time he's the one strapped in. The Man Who Was Death is an interesting start to the Tales from the Crypt series. These stories generally don't have much plot, but this one is especially thin. It basically just comes down to Niles Talbot losing his job as an executioner and then going on a series of murders. With how thin it is though, it still works. William Sadler, who's always great in everything, really shines in the role, and surprisingly, he wasn't the first choice. Originally, Sadler auditioned for the role of the detective that arrests Talbot at the end, but then asked if he could audition for Niles as well. The producers were hesitant in letting him because they were trying to get either Christopher Walken or John Malkovich instead. However, after the audition, director Walter Hill gave him the role on the condition that his performance in the show be the exact same one he gave during the audition. I do think it's a bit of a miss not getting Christopher Walken for the role, but I'd imagine that his performance would be a lot more hammy than Sadler's. William Sadler is probably best known as Death in the Bill and Ted movies, and I find it interesting that he played Death and then starred in an episode called The Man Who Was Death. Sadler would return in the wraparound segment for the season 6 episode The Assassin as the same Death from the Bill and Ted movies. He would also go on to star in Tales from the Crypt Demon Knight, which is really awesome and might be the best work of Billy Zane's career.
You fucking ho-dunk, po-dunk, well then there, motherfuckers!
One thing I find interesting with the wraparound segment is how understated the Crypt Keeper is. He has his puns and all that, but it's clear they were still working out just how animated the character was gonna be.
Now that's entertainment.
When comparing the episode to the comic, the story is pretty much the same, except with the main character in the show being renamed to Niles Talbot. And while Edgar is willing to kill people by any means, be it electricity, gas, and even hangings, Niles prefers the good old electric chair.
It's gotta be the old electric chair for me.
One thing I need to point out is when you compare this one to some of the episodes we've already looked at, this one really isn't for kids. Now, this show isn't for kids in general, but they really went out of their way to up the nudity in this one. For the first 2/3 of the episode, it's pretty tame, but then the last 4 minutes or so, it's hard to go a few frames without finding some topless woman dancing. Now, I'm not complaining, but I just figured I'd point it out. This is a simple episode with a great character actor in the lead. It's nothing amazing, but definitely worth watching. But what do you think of The Man Who Was Death? Let me know down in the comments. Anyways, that's all for today. I hope you're having a great Monday and stay spooky!
Had any nightmares recently? Never fear. The Crypt Keeper's here. And I guarantee you'll get a charge out of this.
I find you both guilty of the murder of your former wife, Mr. Carney.
Who are you?
And I sentence you to death. Your sentence to be carried out immediately.
Wait a minute!
The Man Who Was Death. Another brilliantly executed tale from the Crypt.
Warning, strong content. Parental discretion advised.